Welcome to The Disruption Is Now. Join us on this enlightening journey as we explore how AI is impacting our jobs, careers, lives, and the human experience. Each episode, host Greg Matusky will converse with visionaries and innovators at the forefront of AI, diving into its challenges, opportunities, and impact. So buckle up as we venture into the heart of disruption, and together, let's unfold the future.
Well, welcome to another episode of The Disruption Is Now, the podcast about all things AI. And I got to tell you, I was up last night at about 3 o'clock, really excited about our guest today because he's been one of my personal mentors through LinkedIn and Twitter as far as what's new and exciting in AI. He has a very diverse background, a guy I really respect. Conor Grennan is the Dean of Students at New York University's Stern School of Business. He has an interesting background, but I do share with him a lot of his enthusiasm about AI, generative AI specifically, and what it'll do to help advance the world. So, Conor, thanks for being with us, and thanks for taking the time to share with us this morning.
Yeah, Greg, I was looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
And, your background's very interesting to me. You're a New York Times bestselling author in completely unrelated field. It was interesting to me, your book, How One Man's Promise to Return the Lost Children of Nepal. I think I got that title right. It was a bestseller. How do you go from the nonprofit world and what you've done there, and tell us a little bit about that, into the world of AI?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question, right? Yeah, my background, it's funny. So, I have a nonprofit background. We were doing a lot of work in Nepal over the years with trafficked children, but then I went over to Stern, to NYU Stern. I got my MBA from there years ago, and I joined them about 10 years, a little less than 10 years ago, in this Dean of Students role for the MBA program. And, as you know, in this world, in the MBA program, it's pretty diverse, right? I mean, it's every industry, everything like that. So you have to wear a lot of hats. But the thing that I was always, most passionate about was, coaching MBAs and figuring out, how we can, learn together and everything like that, right? But it was very much that sort of thing where you had to understand a little bit about everything, banking and consulting, everything else. So my background is really as an academic, right? It's really in this world of building out frameworks for how we think about what the new thing is coming down the pike and culture and everything like that. And so the pivot there was a really strange one, which is I kind of discovered ChatGPT around the same time I think a lot of people did, which was a little over a year ago. And I discovered it because my wife was using it. She's actually in AI at McKinsey. She's a lawyer by trade. She was doing responsible, ethical AI, things like that. But the interesting thing, Greg, and you know this better than anyone, when I kind of checked it out, I realized very, very quickly that this wasn't something that required a technical background at all. And I kept sort of thinking that can't be the case, but it really, really is. And so that kind of launched this whole journey of how I ended up creating this whole AI mindset framework and launching everything that we've launched now.
And that's really what fascinated me when I first came to it was, and we'll use the buzzword, natural language processing. I always tell my people internally at Gregory FCA that it's just riff. Talk to it like it's a person. You don't have to worry about whether you're being repetitive, whether it has any kind of organization to it. As writers, we learn how to write leads or transitions. You really don't need any of that. Think of it as your personal assistant and try to be as specific as you can and load as many facts as you can in the prompt. And that's what blew me away. I wrote a blog post very early in the process that said, you don't need a prompt engineer, you need an English major. And that's been our guiding light here at Gregory FCA, was to really get people not to focus on the data, right? The commas, the grammar, the syntax, but really to focus on the message. What do you want to deliver? And when we really think about that with people here who work in PR and generate a lot of content, right, it makes sense all of a sudden. And it really accelerates the learning curve, as I was sharing with you. I'm a writer by trade, and it was so frustrating for me for many years to try to teach writing, because everyone would get bogged down in, the AP style and syntax. And when you release them from that, you can really focus on where you want to take it in novel and unique ways. I don't know. Does that parrot your experience?
So 100% in a really funny way. I have this AI mindset newsletter that comes out once a week, and I think you and I
can
are,
sign up for that at your website.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for saying that. If you go to ConorGrennan.com, the really cool thing, by the way, Greg, is that with that, just to plug it for 1 second, you get this free AI mindset generative AI quick start guide, which I developed with this amazing designer, Robert Haslam, who's like this legend. And it's just really easy, but it's, so you get that, and then you get this, and the newsletter is using the framework that I use. And so, and just to sort of say a quick word about that, when I started developing it, because, and I say all this, by the way, because same thing, right? The latest newsletter, I think, was called "The Future Belongs to English Majors," which is hilarious, right? So you and I are, anybody who uses it deeply is coming to the same thing. And the way that all kind of evolved is the really interesting part, because I think people hear that and they hear it in the same way they hear, oh, culture is the most important thing, or the soft skills are important. But the truth is, and I come from a business school background, and this in the business world with your company, that's actually not true. I mean, it is true, but people don't respect it in this way because they're looking for P&L and engineers and all that kind of stuff. The really interesting thing is that, as you just said, and as you've discovered and put out into the world, if you understand relationships and how to speak, you're actually going to use this often better than people who understand tech, because it's not tech. And the funny thing is, the way that I developed this AI mindset thing was that, I built out a framework for the students, and back in a year ago, the MBA students. And I started going out to companies to try to figure out use cases, right? Like we all did, right? We're like, well, what are the use cases for this? Everybody wants to talk use cases. And so I started going out to like heads of companies, usually hedge funds and asset management places and things like that we knew in New York, and saying, hey, how are you using this? Because I'm trying to teach our students. And they were like, well, and you know what I'm going to say, Greg? Well, we're not really using it, right? And so I was like, oh, okay, well, it's, probably powerful stuff. You should check it out. So they sort of said, well, can you come and teach us what you're teaching your students? And I was like, yeah, sure. It'll be a great way for me to learn. So I would do that. And, here's the thing, Greg, you'll get this right away, that I started teaching it in a certain way, which is sort of like basic to advanced, right? This kind of 3-part framework. And it was great. And people were like, this is going to change everything. But then what happened was something really weird, which was, that's when I kind of diverged from a lot of how people teach this, because what I was finding out was that even though they would, they loved it and they would get some use cases going, I would go back and I'd be like, so how's it going? They're like, oh, we're still using those use cases you gave us. I'm like, wait, but those are just things I came up with on the fly. Like, I don't know, like they're your use cases, man. So, and the other thing is, it wasn't, or they would not be using it at all. And so even though this framework that I had worked, I was like, it's not doing what you and I know it can do, which is transform an organization. And so I tossed it out, which is a very hard thing to do. And I started again. And this time I started by collaborating with some people who really understood the brain very well and neuroscience very well. And we came to this new whole framework of realizing it's actually not the tool that's the problem, it's our brain that's the problem. And, how we see it and what our brain gets locked into and why we use it the wrong way, or why we use it in a way that feels like the right way, but it's very, very limited in how we use it. And it's sort of like, somebody being like, I'm never going to be faster than this old bicycle. And I'm like, dude, I have a car over here. So all that is to say, once I changed it, then it really took off. And so now I ended up sort of like doing this big thing for OpenAI and NASA and McKinsey and like all these giant
Tell
things.
me more about that, because, when we started I am the senior member of the firm, and this is a young person's business I'm in, right? I'm 63. I should be the most resistant person in the world. I spent 30 years mastering my craft. And instead, I was so excited about it that I said, this can't come from the organization. It has to come from the top, right? I have to understand this as well, if not better. And then I've got to build internally a coalition of the willing, people who really want to take part in it.
Yep.
And I need to promote them, right, as bell cows. I need to have them. Then the ideas can percolate throughout the organization. So in the beginning, right, I was giving all the use cases because it was so new and no one had studied it yet. And I was the impetus. Today, it's coming from all points of the organization. Well, somebody will say, look, I just built a crisis management prompt that anyone could use to fine tune their skills. Okay. Or I just built an onboarding prompt, which gets all the information initially so you can use it to inform your prompts later on. So, and we're committed to we do like 2 training sessions a week internally to try to get it. So this is where you go when something perplexes you or you feel that gnawing feeling that you have to do an assignment or a task, right? You should always go there first to see what it could do for you. But that's it. I mean, that's all I got, right? Because I'm not a professor. I don't have the opportunity to talk to neuroscientists. So go deeper for me. What have you learned? How do you get it socialized in a way that can really affect and change organizations and enterprises?
Yeah, this is the big question. And it's interesting to hear how you talk about it, because these are things that you, and I think that a good deal of people out there too, just sort of figured out, right? And the people who figured it out were also the ones who, when GPT-4 came out, they're like, I need the latest thing. So when I see all these numbers saying, oh, this level of adoption around America, I don't know about you. I've worked with, thousands of people, and I do, workshops with companies. I do a ton of training for companies, and I'm kind of like on the road every week. So I talk to thousands of people, Greg, and I know you're going to agree with me on this. Those numbers are so skewed. Like there is no way that 80% of people in companies are using this, or I should say they've tried it and they're using it for like email, things like that. But they are, because then I say, okay, now who's used ChatGPT-4? Who pays $20 a month for the Plus account? And maybe 5% max of the room goes up, right?
That's one of my biggest pet peeves. I start conversations by saying, you have the opportunity to avail yourself to the corpus of human knowledge ever been produced on the internet for $20 a month. I mean, this was to a group of professors at a major university. And I said, buy the $20 a month version.
We'll front you. We'll front you all. Like, it's one of these things where it's so like, but unless you know what it is, people think, well, people don't like spending $20 a month. That's a lot of money, right? But here's the thing here, and here's the huge difference, is that when people then see it, it's wildly different. So I do a lot of keynotes, and I do a lot of, just this stuff, right? I'm on the road, a good amount these days. Luckily, I get to do some remote too. But here's the thing that you've discovered and you do with your team, and what I've had to do because I'm in an academic institution is figure out, like, okay, why? What has Greg figured out that other people aren't? So this is what I have, kind of dove deep into. So here's what I was starting to realize. I was starting to realize, first of all, that people just instinctively see this as tech, and thus they see it as software. One of the very first things I say in any talk that I give is, first of all, I say I have no background in tech, zero. The second thing I say is, this looks like a digital transformation. It is not. It is change management. And so people think, oh, yeah, right. But I'm like, no, listen. And here's the thing that I say that's slightly controversial. I've had a lot of pushback on this, but I stick to my guns because I've pressure tested this over and over again. I was like, listen, if you are like, how do we know that there's, like, what I say basically is there's no learning curve. And people are like, you mean there's no technical learning curve? I'm like, nope. I mean, there's no learning curve, because if you can talk to this, as you just said, like a human, right? Like as whatever you want, an assistant or an intern or Jarvis or whatever, you know what I mean? Like something like that. Take whatever analogy you want. If you can do that, you're going to crush this thing. So that's very simple. So why aren't people doing it? Well, I would say that people aren't doing it for the same reason that, Greg, I don't know about you, like, I would love to get in great shape. Do you know what I mean? Like, to impress the people you want to impress, whether it's your spouse or whatever. So, Greg, I can do this. All I need to know is eat less and exercise, right?
Right.
Incredibly simple.
Right.
Simple. So what's the problem? Because everybody can eat less and everybody can exercise. You don't need it. You don't need to learn anything. You just do that. The problem is behavior. The problem is the brain does not want to do those things. And the brain gets in the way of this as well. That's what's so interesting about it.
It is. And let's just frame where we are right now, right? You wrote a LinkedIn post or a Twitter post or an X post rather on last week being the most exciting
Yeah.
week in the history of AI. No, honestly. And I would just say that I found the week before Christmas and New Year's not exciting, but upsetting
Yeah.
when the chaos started in the boardroom at OpenAI, and we had spent all this time learning OpenAI, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, did I choose the wrong platform? Is this going to explode?
Yeah.
But I agree with you that last week was exciting. So frame for us what came out last week, where we are. The train's running by us, and we're looking at one car on the tracks now. Where are we?
Yeah, so I think that so you're right, and I've had Chris McKay over at Imaginative and other people were like, Connor, what about the OpenAI week? I agree, that was the most exciting week, but that was because of royal drama. The reason that I would put last week as number one, maybe number two, to an early week in March when Bard came out, a few things came out that week. I remember very clearly. So here's what happened last week that I thought was interesting. And I'm not even talking about some of the big investments in, Magic by Nat Friedman,
Right.
things like that people, you kind of have to know the industry a little bit to care about. Here's the really interesting thing. Sandwiched right on top of each other were these things, right? First, ChatGPT comes out with essentially announcing that it's going to have a memory. That is a huge thing. And if you use Teams, you're probably going to get it early on. But what that means is that it's going to start really learning who you are and what you are, rather than just having a custom instruction saying, this is what I want you to do.
It relates this to the dating that you did, I think today, about dating.
Yeah, no, right. Yeah, like the 51st dates thing, right?
Right.
It's like,
right.
Because chats, as you know, it's either cryogenically frozen in time and you can go back in a month and picks up exactly where it was, or you go to a new chat and I'm like, hey, I'm Connor. They're like, nice to meet you, Connor. I'm like, what? So here's the challenge is that if you can get it to start remembering very basic things about you, that's going to be really, really, and I don't love the word game changing, but it really will, because that's the beginning of personalization of this thing. So that came out about 48 hours later, 24 hours later. Gemini 1.5 comes out. So why is that big? We waited a year, well, not 10 months for Gemini. Everybody's like, this is going to be the ChatGPT killer. And in December, it came out and it was a dud. It was a dud. Like, they faked the demo, everything like that. The fact that they came out with a new version that was so much bigger 2 months later, I'm like, okay, now we're talking. This is Google going. And then 2 hours later is when OpenAI drops Sora, which is a completely revolutionary text to video. And so that's where we saw the speed of all of this. So things are not being measured in, I wonder what this is going to be like in 6 months. Greg, you probably get this question a lot. What's it going to be like in 2 years? I'm like, 2 years? Like, what's it going to be like in March? So like, that was why last week was so interesting to me.
And it's interesting. I think you did this earlier in the day. You may have posted the Canva experience with, was that you?
Yeah.
Right. The customization. I think.
Oh, yes. Carvana.
Okay. Carvana. Right.
Yeah.
And it was good. Right. It customized it and it had animation in there. And then 4 hours later comes Sora and you're like, oh my goodness, did we just do this? Did we just compress 5 years into a couple hours? I got a quick question for you. Which video do you like best that was released with Sora?
So I think that the kind of the spaceman one, that trailer, only because it zooms past a Mid-Journey worthy image of a guy. Like, everything else, I can sort of like make the case that it's like, oh, I can kind of see what it's doing. When I saw that, a close-up of something that looked absolutely photorealistic and zoomed past, that to me, I was like, I don't understand just what happened here.
Yeah, I'm a sucker. I like the golden retrievers. I've always had golden retrievers, so I like the 3 golden retrievers playing in snow.
Yeah.
So that was my favorite. And here in the studio beforehand, I have my associate Dan. We're talking about what it's going to do, and I started to sing, "Say goodbye to Hollywood, say hello to AI," and he got mad at me because he's produces all our podcasts and videos, and he has a great respect for all that. And I brought up the point to him. I said, consider Uber and all the pent-up demand it discovered for personal transportation, right?
Yeah.
We didn't know that beforehand. And I just think there's huge pent-up demand for video entertainment. And we see a couple releases. This is why when we go to Netflix or we go to Hulu, we go, oh, there's nothing on, right? There's a huge throttle, a huge hurdle to get anything produced. who you know, how much money you have, all the connections that you have to work that none of us have. And I just think there's going to be an explosion of super creators who come along and create really compelling, very personal or very intimate stories that may relate only to anybody that grew up in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, but will have a real audience, just like Uber does. And that's my great hope for it. I just think it would. Early in this game, I saw a study that 65% of us say we have more creativity in ourselves than we can express. And I just think there's a lot of people out there with ideas, scripts, and if they could master the basics of this, could execute in a way that we've never seen before, like Uber did.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And here's the thing, like about what it's going to replace and all that kind of stuff. I think that it's going to, when sometimes people look at the tool right now, they're like, not really. But I'm like, man, just wait a few months. Like this is as bad as it's ever going to be today. I also think that animation will come. It'll come from for animation first, right? I mean, like it's hard to get sort of some kind of tool going where it's going to show real people and where it doesn't turn into something nightmarish. I mean, all you have to do is like really test out Midjourney and try to get Midjourney to give you the image that you actually want, to realize that how hard. I mean, it's extremely easy, but it's hard to do well. So the people that do things like Midjourney really well, I've talked to a lot of them, obviously. They, above all, they have patience and they understand what good art looks like. And so that's sort of the human in the loop part, is that like, if you and I are just say like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, why don't we create this? It's going to be hard for us to create, not because we can't create a million bad ones, but we just don't necessarily have the patience or understand like what to tweak to make it look better,
What has surprised you most? That was one of the questions I put on LinkedIn today. I'm going to interview one of my favorite thought leaders, and what would you ask them? So that was one of the questions. What surprised you most in the whole process?
I think like in terms of like generative AI, I think that what's surprised me most is the sheer speed of it. It's sort of like we went from nothing to absolutely everything out there, kind of like all at once. I'm a little surprised that how OpenAI is rocketing past everybody. I really thought that we'd have a lot more big competitors. Now they partnered up with Microsoft, so but that's really a distribution question. That's not and a capitalization question. That's not really like what Microsoft is bringing to the table in terms of their tech savvy, I don't think. So I guess I'm really shocked that Google is so far behind. I'm really shocked that Apple is so far behind. I'm really shocked that some the really, really mega players who have hundreds of thousands of people working for them and limitless resources haven't rocketed ahead. So I think that that's my big surprise, and I think that it's only going to sort of speed up and speed up. So I think for me the big thing is to sort of say like, wow, OpenAI could have been sort of the small player in the lead, but now they are the colossus that's steamrolling every small startup. I also didn't expect all these small startups to get just again steamrolled so quickly. Like I'm a huge fan of some of these things, but and when people were building things that like, oh, this kind of melds onto Excel and this does this, holy cow, they got just wiped out very, very quickly. And so I think if anything, it's the speed that I'm shocked at.
I think the great irony is that the irony of the market leader, right? There's a term for that. You're an academic, but they have so much sunk cost into the way they've done things that they just can't be as nimble as what OpenAI is, which has no pre-drawn conclusions. And that's what's amazing about the platform. It wasn't built for any purpose. It was a general purpose platform that you could use for so many different things. I'll tell you what has surprised me most is how much it's transformed me as a PR professional.
Yeah.
And how much it's liberated me and how it's, again, reinvigorated my career because it's excited me. It's finally, like, I never used to do speaking or podcasts, Conor, because I just couldn't talk again about how to write a news release. Like that was utter misery. Yeah. Now I can talk about a whole new field that's going to be transformative and important. And I can make promises to my people that I never could before. I tell them, when we're done, you're going to be the best trained AI PR practitioners in the country, and your career is going to be assured. I promise you. That's my promise to you. I don't care. I don't know where you're going to go in the world. I'd love you to stay forever, but you're going to be more valuable wherever you go because you're going to sit down someday. The job interview is going to be, here's the challenge. here's OpenAI, write the prompt and deliver me XYZ in 30 minutes. And you're going to laugh at this and say, I've been doing this for years.
Yeah.
And that's where I think we're going. I think that's what the interview process is going to be. And from now on, I plan to, well, there's no one that's really could really do that assignment, I'm afraid. But why not present them a case study in PR and say, hey, write the news release, write the blog post, create a website copy, create a PowerPoint presentation. You got 30 minutes, go. And, you know, that's the old 30-minute Ethan Mollick approach that he pioneered. Now he's got it down to what, 57 seconds or something. That's probably the wrong timeline.
That's right. No, but I think that's right too. I mean, the notion of how fast people can do things and how I guess how much sort of that can impact individuals. I think the thing that's surprising also is that it's just so unlike anything else. I mean, when you discover it, you're like, why isn't everybody doing this? But it's sort of like people who've like discovered yoga or eating healthy or something. They're like, why isn't everybody doing this? Right. It's, well, the reason that they aren't doing that is because, you know, it's physically painful on the body to start those things. And so, you know, your brain, you know, puts you sort of like at odds with that. But this is much different because dopamine starts hitting almost immediately, I'd say. So the other thing that I say a lot is that, you know, one of the things that holds people back, I think, is that, and I know this sounds strange, but usually it's like the perfect is the enemy of the good. And in marketing, sort of like, you probably know that better than anybody. But in a way, I kind of find it's like the opposite, which is like the good is the enemy of the perfect, because I think people are so blown away by what, you know, a free version of ChatGPT does in terms of helping people, I don't know, write emails faster or brainstorm about something. That's great. Those are really good uses. But it can do so much more that I kind of liken it to, like if you gave somebody an iPhone and said, hey, this is a new kind of phone, you know, your brain is like, okay, so I'll use this as a phone. And then if you accidentally stumble upon the flashlight, you'd be like, this is the greatest phone of all time. And then if you found the camera by accident, you'd be like, well, no tech will ever surpass this on my telephone. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it's almost like people are so caught off guard by how great it is that they don't even think to like push it. And here's the thing. You don't need to know anything additional to push it. Like it's your same brain. You don't have to learn anything else. That's the thing that's always surprising to me.
And it comes down to like I always tell my people internally, we're very fortunate in embracing this because we're not technicians, so we're not software developers. So we never expected the outcome to be consistent.
Yeah.
We were content people and we're in an ethereal business. So you don't know, right? Somebody could write something in the office next to me, very much different than what I produce, but no less valuable, right? So the outcomes could be different and still valuable and not consistent. Same is true when we do a lot of media relations. I can't guarantee that the Wall Street Journal will run an article, but the outcome might be different, but no less valuable. I find that people that come from the technical side, they want that consistency. I find people that come from the artist side, the writing, the content, they can balance that in their mind and use all and receive all kinds of results and not be intimidated by it. But my wife, for instance, who's a dietitian, she's off put sometimes because the outcome will be different. But I've got one last question for you, and I appreciate your time. It's coming so rapidly. Sometimes I just feel like, I say this often, I wake up on a Monday morning. If I took Sunday off, I feel like I didn't study for the midterm here, and I'm like panicked. When will it slow down? When will there be some calm motions so we can all just catch up and become better practitioners instead of constantly chasing the shiny new thing?
Yeah, chasing the shiny new thing, I think, is exactly the problem. I think that we have this FOMO, and so we're kind of grasping all these other things. When I go, so I do a lot of training for companies, and I'll go in, the first question I get asked is, what are the 10 tools that I need to know? I'm like, don't worry about it. Like, you just need to understand how ChatGPT works, and you will get 99% of what you need done. So I don't think it's going to slow down. I am wondering sort of if people will get somehow burned out on it. I mean, this has been a year of this. I don't think so, because everything is so startling, but maybe you and I just live in a bubble. I don't know. So I don't think it's going to slow down. I think that hopefully the interfaces will get to the point where people will be able to use it better, but that's sort of the next leap that I'm hoping for.
Well, I want to thank you for being with us. I also want to thank you for what you're doing for the world. And I know this might sound a bit hyperbolic, but as an employer, it's really important that our educational institutions understand what they're facing, accept it, and put in place those skill sets that those young people can really use to advance and assure their career in the future. So educators like you, I really admire. I admire what you're doing for the world as a whole, and that you're sharing and collaborating. And as we said, there's no place you're going to learn this in a textbook. The only way you can learn it is by following thought leaders like yourself, which you can do at your website or certainly on LinkedIn or X. And it was a great conversation. I really appreciate it, Conor.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, I really had a good time. It was really fun.
Thank you.
This podcast is a production of Gregory FCA. If you enjoyed our discussion today and want to continue exploring the transformative power of AI, please check out more episodes and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.